Hello, everyone. I'm Barry Sullivan, Director of Program Development for the Marconi Society, and it is my pleasure to introduce this Marconi Society presentation on the Connecting North Carolina initiative. This is broadband to fuel education, healthcare, and rural development. Before I introduce our moderator, let me just share a few housekeeping notes. First of all, you'll notice at the bottom of your screen that there's a Q&A button. We will have an opportunity at the end after our panel makes their presentation and has a short discussion. So toward the end of the session, you will have the opportunity to put your own questions to the panel, and I'll ask you to do so using that Q&A feature on the Zoom screen in front of you. We will be recording this session. You may have heard the announcement that the session is being recorded, and it will be posted on the Marconi Society website later this week, so you can look forward to that as well. With that said, we can advance to the slide with the panelists. It's my pleasure to introduce the moderator for today's session, Tracy Dokes. Tracy is President and CEO of MCNC, the technology nonprofit focused on delivering high-performance, protected internet and networking, cloud services, cybersecurity, and other essential technologies for communities throughout North Carolina. MCNC owns and manages nearly a 4,500-mile fiber optic infrastructure backbone, the North Carolina Research and Education Network, NCREN, that supports more than 900 community anchor institutions in all 100 counties of North Carolina. Tracy, it's all yours.
Hi, good afternoon. Hello and welcome. I'm Tracy Dokes, as Barry mentioned, and thank you for joining us today to discuss strategies, successes, and challenges in creating digitally equitable communities across North Carolina. We are so pleased to partner with the Marconi Society for this meaningful conversation, and we've assembled a fantastic group of innovators from across the state to join us today who are ready to share their perspectives and answer your questions. As we have this discussion today, let's provide some advice for other states that may be contemplating some of these issues as well. So I would like to start with having each panelist introduce themselves, and I'll start with Nate Denny.
Thank you, Tracy. Really appreciate the introduction and the chance to speak with this group today, with all of these leaders from across the state. I'll just briefly talk a little bit about our work at the North Carolina Department of Information Technology, which is the division or the unit of state government in Governor Roy Cooper's cabinet that's tasked with closing the digital divide. During the pandemic, as it became abundantly clear that the urgency of this issue was really hitting us in the face, the governor identified that we would have a unique funding opportunity between the American Rescue Plan and other forthcoming federal funds to address every angle of the digital divide: access to infrastructure, the ability to afford the service, the devices and skills needed to really keep up in the modern economy. And we know that about 1.1 million North Carolinians have one or more of those problems and can't fully participate today online. And that need is across the state. If you can jump to the next slide. The governor created the Division of Broadband and Digital Equity in the Technology Department to tackle this problem. And so we have worked to map out need across the state. This is a snapshot of unserved and underserved locations across North Carolina. And you'll see that it's east and west, it's urban and rural, it's all across our state. Really dramatic need, about 550,000 locations that are unserved or underserved. And so to do that, if you can jump one more slide, please. To do that, we're leveraging more than $1 billion of American Rescue Plan funds and preparing for the new BEAD program, or Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, provided by the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. These funds will help us create grants for internet service providers to go into unserved and underserved locations, help us identify gaps that remain after we've done major fiber deployment across the state, help us build awareness of the Affordable Connectivity Program, which helps low-income North Carolinians afford internet service, and help get devices and training needed to those North Carolinians. So look forward to talking with the panel a little bit more about this, but just wanted to kind of give you a very high-level look at what we're doing with the state of North Carolina to address these problems.
Great. Thank you, Nate. Tracy Futhy, who is the CIO and Vice President of Duke University.
Thanks, Tracy. Great to be here with this group, and love the conversation we're going to have today. It's near and dear to my heart, and I know to others. So as a CIO at a university and with responsibility over technology, I think a couple of things that I might say in way of introduction would be that all of us in higher ed are in higher ed because we have a passion for education. And these days, that passion for education is much more extensive than the 4 years or 6 years our students might spend at our institutions, because it's really an understanding that learning is lifelong, and we've got to focus on what some call now K to gray. It's no longer K to 20, it's now K to gray. And the recognition that our own citizens in North Carolina, students at our universities, will have many different careers over the course of their life. And so we have to be, it's incumbent on us to be constantly helping to educate and continue to deliver those learning opportunities for them. I would also say that there have been some really great, Tracy started this panel out talking about collaboration. That's been really key to a lot of the things that we've done at Duke and with others on this call. And I look forward to sharing a little bit more about that with all of you. And finally, helping everyone to really recognize that by broadening the engagement through digital access, through broadband, we not only fuel education, healthcare, rural development, but we really invest in the workforce in North Carolina and our own intellectual leadership within the state. And so those things are so important for all the reasons that I've already mentioned, not to mention the inclusivity that helps to bring and drive across our state in overall in education, but particularly near and dear to my heart would be related to STEM. So look forward to sharing some more stories and thoughts on those areas as the panel unfolds. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tracy. Patrick Fleming, the CIO for North Carolina Community Colleges.
Thank you, Tracy, and follow along with what Nate and Tracy mentioned. One of the biggest focuses for the North Carolina Community College system is removing barriers to post-secondary education. And as Tracy mentioned, this kind of from cradle to grave, if you will, I believe, serving K through 12 community colleges or 4-year institutions. Technology and the infrastructure that brings that technology across the great state of North Carolina is at the heart of all of our success. The majority of North Carolina is incredibly rural, and Tracy's team at MCNC, the partnerships all of us on the panel share with making the infrastructure far more robust than it is to be able to deliver these key services, specifically to the 58 community colleges, really is a key driver for sustainable economic success for North Carolina. And I can't say enough about the opportunities that we have in front of us. I know all of us wish we were a little bit further down the road, but each day we continue to improve and bring those key technologies across our state to serve our students and the citizens as they move towards improvement in their own life that also supports their communities and drives the overall economic sustainability for the state. So thank you so much for inviting me here today.
Thank you, Patrick. Appreciate you being here. Bo Coughlin, who is the Chief Operating Officer for FIBE.
Thanks, Tracy. Yeah, part of the team here at Five, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of Rona Cooperative in the northeastern portion of the state, serving many of these and in the process of serving many more of the and underserved population in North Carolina. I think as to some of the other conversations and topics, our goal here is to be able to provide the foundation upon which most of the folks on this panel and beyond are to enable that opportunity to reach the individuals that are currently not being reached. I think some of the challenges we all are aware of, but I think Nate and his folks for hopefully being able to support our future growth and some of the partnerships with MCNC. I think, as I said before, I think this is a really good opportunity to learn about some of the things that we might be able to do and the people we might be able to partner with to really enable the folks that are currently unable to reach the outside world because of the location they live in, to kind of stem the brain drain we've got in rural North Carolina with broadband access and all the services and the educational opportunities that should be available to all of them. So I look forward to the conversation, and thanks again, Tracy.
Yes, thank you, Bo. Tracy Olson is the CEO of the North Carolina Telehealth Network Association, which we affectionately call NCTNA. Tracy, can you take a few moments to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. We're excited to be part of this conversation. For those of you that aren't familiar with NCTNA, we are a 501c3 and we have a member-led board. We're a consortium under the Healthcare Connect Fund. So that means we have healthcare providers across North Carolina, both rural and urban, that are able to work together and get discounts under the Healthcare Connect Fund, which is up to 65%. We use MCNC as our service integrator. So our healthcare providers all get access to the wonderful MCNC network you guys have heard about already today. Our passion overall is really to serve all North Carolina healthcare providers, whether or not they're our members. And to further that, one of the things we've done is we started the North Carolina Healthcare Broadband Coalition. And we have really focused on getting healthcare providers across all of North Carolina, different sectors from large hospitals to small community health centers, to really learn from each other and communicate to make sure that nobody gets left behind in this process. And so I'll be talking from both of those vantage points today. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. And last but not least, our own Tommy Jacobson, who is the Chief Operating Officer at MCNC.
Thank you, Tracy. As she notes, I'm the Vice President and Chief Operating Officer for MCNC.
Yes.
I have been with MCNC for 30 years now, and have seen a lot of direct change from what MCNC has been able to enable over those years. In my current capacity, I provide oversight over all of MCNC's service operations for the delivery of the North Carolina Research and Education Network, security operations, and our data center. Along with the rest of the senior leadership team, I look to position MCNC in the state for success in the future while breaking down the geographical barriers in North Carolina that are keeping all of our citizens from having access to the digital economy. I've had the good fortune of being able to help position North Carolina to solve this problem because of the engagements that we've had with a number of the folks on this call, and in the operation of serving healthcare, education, and other nonprofits, and hopefully as we go forward, assisting folks like FIBE in solving this problem for the residential sector of the state. So happy again to be here.
Great. Thank you to all of our participants today. So let's get started. As you see here, this is more than just high-speed internet that we're talking about. And you've heard a sprinkling of the word digital equity, and it is more than providing high-speed internet. It is about understanding and remedying the underlying inequities in our state and our society that keep many from reaching their full potential, as you've heard some of our participants mentioned already. It is about ensuring that all people have the access, skills, and opportunities they need to fully participate in this increasingly digital world. As we all saw as part of COVID, you could not operate without having some type of internet access. In recognition of that, we also noted how woefully underserved some of the folks in the rural communities were. And broadband infrastructure is really essential for enabling this modern communication and commerce and providing the access to education, healthcare, and other vital services to create these thriving communities. So in each of your respective sectors, what are some of the challenges and opportunities to close this digital gap that we're talking about? I'd like to start with you, Patrick.
So serving a system as large and complex as the North Carolina Community College system with 58 different institutions. The urban and rural divide is real, and it's obvious across our 58 member institutions. One of the larger challenges we've had, and we've had some pretty decent success in this area, is funding. Over the past 3 years, we've been incredibly fortunate working with our General Assembly and some of our partners to invest over $40 million into the community college system technology infrastructure, broadband infrastructure. The MCNC team has been a key partner here, as well as Nate over at the Department of Information Technology. And so prioritizing that budget towards enabling access and sustainability and security has really been a big challenge that we've met head on, had pretty good success with. And of course, getting these services to the 58 colleges and communities they serve open up a broad range of opportunities for the folks on the other end of that infrastructure.
Thank you, Patrick. Tracy, in a couple of minutes, what are some of the challenges and opportunities? I'm sorry, Tracy Olson. I forgot there's like 3 Tracys on this panel, and that's going to make this incredibly difficult. So Olson, can you speak to some of the challenges and opportunities, and we will follow that with Futhi.
That sounds good. I think that the first thing that comes to mind is the telehealth focus groups that we led. I really see that what we are learning from telehealth will apply to many different areas. It can apply to school, people being able to do their bills online. It just shows a lot of different areas where help is needed. Some of the particular challenges above just having high-speed internet or even a cell phone service that is good enough to connect to telehealth is obviously digital literacy is huge. But it's more than that. It requires a digital champion from the healthcare provider side. There's plenty of doctors that are just not sure where telehealth needs to go or where it should go. So I think that's definitely a challenge. And we have seen that where there is really a healthcare provider champion, that telehealth can be much more successful. Getting into even business practices, workflow redesign, it's not as easy as now you have this application that can do so many things versus the in-person doctor. Now you actually have to change your whole workflow of how people are going to connect, how the patient's going to be taught what they need to do, how you make sure that that first session that they have goes really well to get their confidence up. And I think these types of skills and mentorship champions are going to be common across many areas, not just telehealth. And given all that, there's obviously a huge opportunity right now with state and local and other funding. One of the biggest for telehealth is just access to specialists. So whether somebody in a rural area is able to meet with an urban specialist from their home or from a rural health clinic, I mean, the opportunities are just immense to start reaching this group of people in a way that we haven't been able to do before.
Thank you. Futhi, your perspective.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll start on the opportunity side because that then quickly leads into the challenges. I think that the huge opportunity for all of us in the education space is the idea of online learning and how do we extend what we're already doing through digital means. And that is in some ways sort of a perpetuating challenge with the digital gap that exists, but it's also a huge opportunity, right? Because the extent to which we can begin to deliver materials in ways that can be consumed, even if not from a full broadband connection, at least from a cellular connection on a cell phone, we can start to raise the station, so to speak, raise the potential for folks who otherwise might not have had access to that information. So, so that I think is the biggest opportunity. Obviously, we have great institutions throughout North Carolina, not to mention the country, but so many people just simply don't have access or the physical means to even leave their location to go take courses there. So that's why I stress so much the online learning is a great opportunity. The two things that leads me quickly to on the challenges side aren't about digital gaps, aren't about broadband. They're about simple things like different identities and different credentials to show completion. The identities make it very, very difficult for us to teach a course to someone who's a high school senior and have that person then become a student at Duke or at another university and transfer, right, that identity, transfer that achievement. And then related to that would be the credentials. If a person takes a course at another institution, we should have ways, even if they take that course when they're a sophomore in high school, how can they get credit for that and have that credit relate to future education that they'd receive? Likewise, when we have people who are older learners who have already had one career, maybe haven't ever been to college or maybe haven't been to college in many, many years, we need ways to continue to connect with them and to be able to grant those credentials that will be meaningful to them toward their workforce development, toward their next change in career. So just to again say, I think there's huge opportunity. It does relate to broadband and high-speed internet, but it relates to a lot more than that. It relates to the chance to have equal access to education, no matter where you live, no matter what your background is. But there are some challenges that go along with that.
Thank you. Nate, I'm sure you have a lot to say about this topic, and you and I have talked about this many times.
I have 2.5 billion things to say. I think on opportunities, let's be clear. This is a once in a lifetime funding opportunity, right? Between the American Rescue Plan and the bipartisan infrastructure law, we have $2.5 billion to invest in this problem, right? That is enough. I think 2 slides beyond that brings the funding picture back. That's enough to fix the problem, right? That is enough to make sure that every North Carolinian has access to a reliable high-speed internet connection. And so I think we're, because Governor Cooper directed the state to invest in a big way with the American Rescue Plan before even getting to the BEAD program, I think we're really well positioned to capitalize and to move quickly compared to some other states. The other thing, I think even more important than the funding is the partnerships that are represented across the state, right? I think we have county governments, municipalities, nonprofit organizations, and other stakeholders like the Rural Center, MCNC, so many of the organizations that are represented here on this panel today are all seizing the moment, are all recognizing this opportunity and working really hard to address it. And we've also got, frankly, the one issue that has true bipartisan support too, right? Everybody recognizes the need here. Red districts and blue districts alike are feeling the pain here. As much as we talk about this as a rural problem, it is not exclusively a rural problem. And it is not exclusively a conservative district or liberal district problem. It's everywhere. It's all around us. on the challenges, the thing that concerns me the most right now is our ability to do anything about the cost of an internet subscription. The Congress, as a part of the bipartisan infrastructure law, created the Affordable Connectivity Program, which provides a $30 a month subsidy to low-income Americans. Just to give you a sense of the impact of that program, we now have more than 857,000 households in North Carolina alone that are enrolled and benefiting from that program. It originally got a $14 billion appropriation from Congress. The downside to signing up that many people to this program is that they're running through the program really quickly. And it could be as early as next spring that we see funding start to dry up in the Affordable Connectivity Program. If we spend billions of dollars to subsidize internet providers building infrastructure out and then turning around and charging us for it, and folks can't afford the service that's funded, we're all in trouble. That's a big problem for trust, for credibility of government and private sector efforts alike. And so we need additional funding for that program. We need Congress to act on that program and make sure that since we all recognize that the high cost of internet service, that's not a one-time problem. That is an ongoing challenge we'll have to keep meeting in North Carolina and beyond.
Well said. Bo?
Yeah, I mean, I think to what everyone said, I mean, there are definitely some opportunities. I mean, but specifically on the challenges side, I mean, for us, you know, as a last mile fiber optic provider, I mean, the challenges we have are obviously resources, but not necessarily specific to funding. While that's the challenge, but I believe Nate and everything that they're being able to accomplish will suffice in that case. But it's the ability to not only commit to delivering this high speed fiber optic service, but it's to the on and underserved, but to fulfill that promise. It's one thing to say that, you know, to have the, you know, the goal of doing this and committing to it, but you've actually got to fulfill that, and you've got to execute, and you've got to actually be able to provide it at the level that we all have expected nowadays in this world. So for us, it's a focus on doing that. It's the attention to detail and the attention to being able to not only commit, but to execute and fulfill the promises made. The challenges related to, you know, we really do need to have greater partnerships. And I think one of the great things from an opportunity perspective, and some of the great things we've done, I think, you know, there are 26 cooperatives, electric cooperatives across the state of North Carolina. I think partnering with cooperatives who, again, being birthed from a cooperative, right? We're imbued with the ethos of servitude, right? So it places Five specifically in a unique position to have a very specific perspective, right? We believe in serving everyone with a service that meets a standard, you know, we've all come to expect in relation to broadband access, but to do so in a sustainable way, and to do so, to Nate's point, in an affordable manner. So I think that really the opportunity here is to find those entities that have similar missions to delivering these services to the constituents that they serve in a way that they can not only enjoy it, but also afford it. I think there's a great opportunity for the state of North Carolina, but I also think that's a perspective people can look at across the country in terms of their opportunities with cooperatives and similar type entities to deliver those services.
Thanks, Bo. Tommy?
Everything that they said. So, you know, being an infrastructure guy, I tend to, when I think about the challenges and the opportunities, it's looking at the technology pathways that need to be built to enable this. So obviously you start getting into the challenges of funding. But when you look at North Carolina, relatively speaking, from a landmass perspective, we're not that big. We sit right around the middle of all 50 states. But when you get beyond the metropolitan areas of Raleigh, Charlotte, Greensboro, the Research Triangle area, you start to get into some fairly rural areas of the state. And having lived in this state for the totality of my life, I've been into a lot of those areas. And you know, those folks need, you know, equitable access as well. And, you know, that landmass of, you know, in the rural areas and the unserved and underserved was highlighted, I think, really well by North Carolina securing the 5th highest BEAD allotment that the NTIA gave out. And that's thanks to the leadership of Nate and the Broadband Infrastructure Office and his team. You know, from an opportunities perspective, MCNC has been front and center over the last 10 to 12 years of working to solve the middle mile challenge of this more so than the last mile. which is what the BEAD program will start doing. But from an opportunities perspective, we are always seeking those out. And so we did that yet again this past year when we applied for an NTIA middle mile grant when that program was announced. And I'm happy to say that we were fortunate enough to secure that funding in June this past summer. And so for us, we continue to look for those opportunities and how we can play, and we'll continue to look at the BEAD program as those rules are further outlined and the money becomes available, how MCNC working with other folks like FIBE can be a part of that solution.
Thank you, Tommy. So I think we're all talking about the same thing, right? When we speak to digital equity and what that means, and that we need it to support remote work, we need it for education, we need it for healthcare, we need it for day-to-day living. But the real issue is, no matter how much we all talk about it, being able to provide these comprehensive services is what really helps close that digital divide. We understand this, all of us on this panel, and MCNC understands this and the critical role that broadband plays in supporting all of these things. But in some areas, as we've mentioned, things aren't booming as much because of a lack of internet. So in your DEI work, what have been some surprises? Where have we seen successes, and what can other states learn from these successes? So I'll ask, Patrick, if you could spend 5 minutes answering that question.
So some of the surprises that I think we've seen from a community college perspective really goes along with some of our opportunities and successes, is just how impactful partnering up with the different teams in the state, right? Not just MCNC and DIT, but some of our local partners, to be able to bring the infrastructure and that high-speed internet capability. And then additional surprises were just how much it takes to sustain once it's there. And that has been something Bo mentioned about the different partnerships and how you can leverage some of the local groups in these communities, be it your co-ops or some of your healthcare entities there that have the expertise in some of these areas and share that expertise across the community. We really saw an uptick in how people came together, especially during the pandemic, to make that a reality. And that really helped distribute some of those knowledge, skills, and abilities locally. And we saw that support happen quite a bit. Some of the successes really has been, again, seeing the return on investment from an education perspective. As Tracy mentioned, from the four-year institutions, from Duke perspective, the importance of being able to continue to provide continuing education, continual skill building to fill those needs, say in the healthcare industry. No doubt about it, North Carolina is lacking, just like many other states, in providing qualified healthcare services, specifically with nurses. Our nursing program at the community college system didn't stop during the pandemic. It was the exact opposite. Right. The need just went through the ceiling. So being able to provide online access to higher education opportunity, continue that training and continuing education for certificates, and maintaining those certificates was absolutely critical. Not so much a surprise, but a really big success. Now, with successes come a couple more challenges along the same lines of sustainability. We also quickly discovered, as your team is aware, securing this new infrastructure and provisioning of this internet access. We open up a wide array of challenges there on the cybersecurity front. We saw a couple of instances, ransomware attacks that happened that just stop everything in their tracks. But again, with a challenge comes an opportunity. Our own community colleges came together to start cybersecurity training initiatives that led to different certificates, to put folks to work in those areas. And so it was an interesting dynamic. As we brought more, we experienced more challenges, but we were able to rise up to meet those challenges through higher education opportunities and help everything from cybersecurity to the healthcare industry. While we were doing that for North Carolina, significant growth at the state level. We brought in major new industry into North Carolina, and of course the community college system, workforce development front and center in our partnerships with commerce and industry, tailoring new programs to meet industry growth needs requires additional infrastructure and internet access. So it's really been kind of along the line to Nate's point about suddenly we've got, enough budget to fix a lot of these problems. We've got more opportunities to apply that budget to. And it's really a bit of a really wonderful opportunity that came out from something as horrible as the pandemic was, for everyone involved. Pretty big silver lining on this one. It's just maintaining, operating, keeping that sustainability in place is going to take continued funding, continued focus, and more collaboration and partnerships across our state. And I believe other states can look to North Carolina and appreciate some of these successes, learn from our mistakes, and just keep this conversation moving forward, because we're never going to fix all of it, but we're making really great headway to close that urban and rural divide.
Patrick, you make a very compelling point about, yes, we've got all of this funding that Nate talked about, but it's the sustainability of these programs that we're all clamoring to create for our residents and citizens, and how do we sustain that? Nate, I'm going to look to you now to talk a bit about, some surprises and successes. And again, I consider our broadband organization within the state to be one of the best out there. So I think it's really important that other states learn and understand what they might be able to do differently in order to achieve some of the successes that we have.
Sure. Thanks, Tracy, for that question. I think that Patrick captured a lot of kind of the energy and the collaborative work going on around this issue. And I think the thing that surprises me every day, honestly, is just how many people are doing digital equity work, but not calling it that, right? As we work with communities across the state, we find churches that have a computer lab, right? Where parishioners can gain skills. We find bakeries with free public Wi-Fi that the customers can use. Nonprofits that are offering computer classes or helping get people the devices they need. There are organizations all over the state that are meeting North Carolinians' digital needs, and they might be doing it in a silo, and they might be doing it without the level of resourcing that they need to broaden their impact as much as they could, but they're doing the work, right? And so our focus, especially because the bipartisan infrastructure law is going to make funding available to organizations aside from state government, right? There'll be funds that we have to disperse, and then there will be funds that nonprofits and other community groups across the state can go directly to the federal government and get. Our job is to help build a digital equity ecosystem, right? To really invest across the state so that we're not just paying for the work that's happening, but we're also helping prepare communities to bring even more resources back to North Carolina. And so, there's as much as people love, I'm from the government and I'm here to help, right? There's so much more impact that can be had at the local level if we recognize that work, inventory it, right, and help make connections and support. These problems will be solved locally, right? And local leaders know where the gaps are, know the strengths of their own community, and can help us identify the resources that or the fixers, right, in those communities that can help address need. And so, getting to successes, again, we've really focused here on building strong sets of partnerships that can help us get the word out about the opportunities coming to us from the federal government, but also bring success stories to us. On the infrastructure side, as much as we're working every day with internet providers and, like Bose work at FIBE, we're identifying grantees and solutions locally. We're also working really closely with our Association of County Commissioners, right? Because they've got the local planning, the local expertise, the visibility into need across their communities, and can help us build better infrastructure projects. We've also got a collaborative, our Digital Equity and Inclusion Collaborative, that has more than 24 partners from across the state, nonprofits, refurbishing entities across the state that we bring together on a monthly basis to help talk about that work, and again, help surface the work that other people are doing so we can figure out if there are resources we can bring to bear. And I think that focus on local solutions and amplifying local voices is part of the reason that we're going to be successful with this influx of funding in North Carolina.
And Tracy, if you don't mind, if I can follow up on Nate there. You mentioned, computer rooms in churches and different opportunities at the local level. The state invested a bit in digital navigators, and this was a program to deploy individuals trained in how to use different devices and get on the internet at the local, help folks get on the internet, and then understand how to use those resources. Telehealth is a wonderful opportunity. But if you're working, as Tommy said, I'm a native North Carolinian as well, been across the state for many, many, many years. There are challenges out there that we do not always see in some of our metropolitan areas that require hands-on training in the community just to use the devices that we're now able to make available to the citizens there. And so the Digital Navigator grant, leveraging that grant with the community college system, we've got 20 institutions we were able to staff with digital navigators to enable folks in those communities to learn how to use this new broadband and the infrastructure and the broadband capabilities. That has proven to be incredibly important. And so it's a bit of a surprise and a success. We need more of these people to get out there into our rural areas to help people understand the how, right? And that's been a great opportunity there in North Carolina.
Great. Tracy Futhy, do you want to take a couple of minutes just to mention the NC Share project and some of the work that we've been doing there as collaborative partners?
Absolutely. And so I really want to draw together themes that we've been talking about. I really like the comments from Nate and others about it has to be a local solution, right? You've got to figure out how to bring together those resources. Also, your framing comments at the beginning, Tracy, this is all about collaboration. So for the past couple of years, we've had a project that we call NC Share. It is supported by a couple of grants from a couple of grant awards from the National Science Foundation. And what it aims to do is recognize and acknowledge that some of the big research universities have the resources and the capacity to do things that some of the smaller or lesser resourced universities in the state or colleges in the state may not have. And so the example here is at a research university, we can find ways to transmit data much faster because we simply have the funding available to build a research network. At the smaller universities, colleges, that's not necessarily the case. And so NC Share brings together MCNC, Duke, and two of the other institutions in the state, North Carolina Central, which is one of our HBCUs in North Carolina, and Davidson, small liberal arts college. And so the idea was how can we take the research network we've built at Duke? How can we use MCNC as a community partner to the benefit of all of higher education in North Carolina? And how can we essentially extend the sort of thing we built within our campus, but so that it could be shared among 10, 20, 50 other institutions that don't have necessarily the resources to build their own for their own campus. So we call this NC Share. And it's a little bit of a tortured acronym, but the idea, you get it from the name, is it lets those smaller institutions share in access to computational capacity and to advanced research network capacity that they otherwise may not have the means to provide themselves to their own faculty and students. So in that way, we get at a little bit of that digital equity, perhaps not quite to the residential level, to the end consumer level, but certainly to try to, again, lift all of us up, raise all boats within the state so that all of our institutions have access to the similar kinds of capabilities. So this idea of, cutting across sectors, public and private partnerships, and collaboration that Tracy introduced has really been essential to making that happen. And we look forward to continuing that project and others so that everyone in the state, whether you're in K through 12, whether you're in community colleges, whether you're at a research university, whether you are a working adult and not actually pursuing education in a full-time capacity, you've got access to the kinds of resources that let North Carolina be a leader in advancing its workforce and advancing its human capital throughout the state.
Great, thank you. Tracy Olson, do you want to spend a couple of moments talking a bit about healthcare and how scaling this innovation across sectors has been impactful to that space?
Sure. One of the most interesting things that we've seen was the success of telepsych. And it was somewhat of a surprise when we got started because you can imagine if you're in a behavioral health provider meeting with the patient and the internet connection isn't the greatest. It's very difficult to see things like rapid blinking of eyes or tension in the shoulders, things like that. So when we first started hearing about it, people were really just needing to get that very base level, the broadband connectivity that they needed. Many providers had to do upgrades to prepare for the surge in telehealth that happened with COVID. The interesting thing about the telepsych is although telehealth visits on a whole went up about 80% with COVID, primary care dropped down to about 10 to 15%, but telepsych stayed at close to 60%. And I think looking at successes for case studies is just such a great way to get people excited about what the possibilities are. Some of the things we've really seen in that area is not just, like I mentioned earlier, replacing the doctor or behavioral health provider with an application or a computer, but actually saying, how can we really improve this service? How can we pull data from nearby hospitals? How can we share data with emergency health providers in the area? How do we eliminate wait times through sharing staff across multiple locations? So it's really exciting, and I think it shows the potential that a lot of telehealth has beyond just telepsych. And mentioning or tying back to what both Nate and Tracy mentioned about local solutions. On one hand, we have that behavioral health, which was able to completely redesign their workflow and automate it, and talking about using artificial intelligence and different devices. And other locations, smaller, more rural, less resources, like was mentioned, they maybe did something that is not quite as shiny and pretty and fun to talk about on the outside, but it works really well. And it's as simple as having a patient drive to a local health clinic, and then staff there helps them do a telehealth visit with a specialist in an urban area. It's a great way to kind of bridge the two, but a great solution and really can be helpful. So I think going back to that local solutions and getting people to talk across multiple sectors, multiple sized organizations is going to open the way for a lot of innovation.
Great, thank you. I'm hearing that, these local voices, local areas and communities are a very large component of all of this. I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about social change. Leadership has been described as the ability to influence others. And that can be good and bad, as most of you know on the panel. When it does come to leading, though, we think about the 5 C's around these traits, which are credibility, communication, commitment, confidence, and creativity, which each one of those instills trust. And I can't remember who it was. I think it was Nate that mentioned something about trust as it relates to all of these projects, all of this funding coming into the state, and being good stewards of that funding. But we know that these partnerships can take time and require real commitment and, of course, trust. So how can we provide these opportunities that we speak of for everyone? How can we use technology to facilitate this participation and, more importantly, create valuable experiences? I think all of you have talked a bit about how we can utilize technology in each of your individual spaces. How can we also encourage diverse perspectives and feel comfortable in doing so, which is a very key part of this question. Bo, you have said that digital equity isn't a sprint or a marathon, but an ultra marathon. Tell me what you mean by that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that the impact of the lack of broadband is multi-generational in nature. From in terms of who is realizing and the challenges related to that. And I think that for us to believe that our ability to solve these challenges is going to be and see the results is going to be anything other than multi-generational in nature is also naive. I think it goes to some of the points related to sustainability and our ability and how we really look at this in terms of we may be able to solve some of the connectivity problems in the next 5-10 years, right? To reach the 500,000 to 1 million, and what Nate has brought up. But to really come and be able to reach all these folks and really see that the fruits of this, it'll impact, our generation to an extent, but the next generation beyond that and the one after that is to sustain this type of opportunity and what we're trying to accomplish this throughout that so that we can see the fruits of this really far, far, far down the road. It's a legacy that we might be able to, provide, but it's really the final results of this are going to be long term. And so we've really got to sustain this focus and sustain our ability to meet the needs of the people that live here in the state of North Carolina, for a considerable amount of time and maintain that focus and not look for the quick win.
Very good point. I'd love for any one of you to speak to support and advocacy, because that is a critical component, especially when you talk about encouraging people at the local level to take on some of these bigger issues and the types of help and support that they need in order to do that. Can any of you speak to support and advocacy in that realm?
Tracy, if I would chime in and mention a kind of a layered project over several years that culminated in what I think is a good example of support and advocacy, and again goes back to the collaboration and the partnerships. So several years ago, Duke and MCNC started together building out some installed fiber in the Durham area, where we at Duke needed to connect to some of our healthcare sites, some of our clinics around the area, and MCNC had its own needs for building out its infrastructure. So we were able to find creative ways to partner up in doing that made it more effective for us to reach those clinics, but also gave MCNC some benefit through some shared infrastructure. So the next thing then that we did was we looked at the city of Durham and we said, well, Duke is already going to several places with a few hundred miles of fiber. Does the city of Durham need to reach any of those any of those areas? And does it have its own sites that would require digital access and broadband and fiber infrastructure? And so they did. And so we started building further with them. And so that partnering between first MCNC and Duke, and then Duke and the city of Durham and the county, Durham County, started getting us greater reach, greater fiber footprint in the Durham area. And then the culmination of that, little long story, but leading to the impact and the support and advocacy came when we were partnered and talking with MCNC and NCCU, and North Carolina Central said, hey, you know, we've heard that there are some challenges in some of the housing authority sites, and the students who are now working from home because of COVID don't have access to sufficient network infrastructure. How can we look at using this infrastructure we already have to find a way to connect them up and give them the kind of resources that will help the students in, you know, elementary school, middle school, high school, and even their parents in some cases, working from a workstation in the facility that would let them apply for a job, right? And they didn't otherwise have access. That last piece, the thing that was important about that is when we talked with NCCU about it, they came in as a partner because they said, we already support and work with some of these housing authority sites. So if Duke and MCNC can help to figure out how to get the physical network connection, NCCU would love to come in and help to do the support, the advocacy on the ground in that housing authority site to give that sort of day two support to the people who might need assistance. And that kind of like everybody coming together and, you know, each throwing in to create, you know, the old parable about stone soup, and it starts with nothing, but everybody adds something, and then together at the end we all have something that really is valuable. Is, I think, a really powerful way to think about support and advocacy.
Yeah, I do too. And I think that's a good sense of community that brings us together in a way that other things don't, right? And so, you know, a crisis like COVID did that for a lot of people. Nate, I think early on I heard you talk about, you know, a lot of in the local level, there were situations where coffee shops were providing Wi-Fi and churches were helping their parishioners. I think early on, I know when I was at the state, we talked about tech hubs. So has there been any more discussion around the tools and training as it relates to tech hubs across the state? Is that something that there will be an investment in order to assist not just the K to Gray, I believe, as Tracy Futhy mentions, but also the parents of these folks and how they apply for jobs or even unemployment or whatever the case may be. Just curious as to what the thinking is at the state level.
Yeah, no, I think we are. Thanks for the question. I think we are always interested in figuring out how our infrastructure investments can be paired with investments that address adoption, right? That address the central location for folks to come and access services, to get a device fixed, or to get a new computer, or have a private room where you could access telemedicine services virtually. You know, I think how those play out in terms of grant funding remains to be seen a little bit, but in the coming months, our Office of Digital Equity and Literacy will make available additional grant funding for community groups of many different types and sizes to come forward with proposed projects. And my hope is that we'll see some of that work exemplified there.
Excellent. Excellent. So I'm going to shift a bit to talk about on our next slide, this new wave of innovation and what that means. You know, it's driven by this new generation of leaders that are passionate about serving the world's biggest problems. I'd also say, you know, there's still a generation that may not be considered new, myself included, that also feel very passionate, right, about solving the world's biggest problems. And this wave is very exciting as it relates to digital equity and inclusion and how we all work to improve the lives of our communities. This movement, though, that we're talking about here and why we're all here really does speak to how we ensure access to the internet. And like we just talked about a second ago, gaining the right skills through tools and training and advocacy to use it effectively. So, you know, we can close the digital divide and create more equitable society by working together, which we've all talked about. But when you think about comprehensive community infrastructure, what does that mean to you in the context of digital equity? How can we foster cross-sector engagement in this effort throughout the state? And again, what advice would you give to other states who are trying to do the same thing? And I'm going to start with Tracy Olson.
All right. I think the first thing that comes to mind regarding innovation in this area is it really wasn't that many years ago when we talked about the typical thing you would have heard, like a single mom with multiple kids needs to maybe bring one of her children to a doctor, but she doesn't have a car, or she can't get time off work, doesn't have childcare. And at that time, the innovative solutions were, we'll give her a bus pass, we'll do ride share. And there were definitely things like that that helped. But telehealth really wasn't talked much about at that time, and it is critical in this area. And along those lines, permanent legislation to make sure we can use it the way it's meant to be used is really important. The other piece is just that cross-sector thing, the communication, is not to overlook anyone. I mean, we have had conversations with large health systems, and then we've had talked to community health centers. And you learn so much from bringing people together from the different perspectives. And while the large health systems were really exciting to hear about what they're doing with artificial intelligence and with devices and with digital champions. And then when we shifted and we met with the community health centers, they had trouble maintaining connectivity just for our Zoom session. One of them had to take a break because they needed to close their entire FQHC for the afternoon because they could no longer access their EMR. Another person on the call had to switch to her cell phone, and her cell phone wasn't that much better. And so by really talking to people from all these different areas, all the different locations and different sectors, different organizations, you just see and hear so many stories and get such a more accurate picture, I think, of what life is like across many diverse populations.
That's a very good point. And I think Tracy Futhy mentioned this in her opening statement, and it's the inclusivity and what it means when you don't have all the right tools, the internet connection, and all those things that, the metropolitan areas have if they can afford them in order to participate in some of these things you're talking about. And that does mean that we are missing some of those diverse perspectives because they can't participate. And that is a really, really big issue because we will continue to lose that unless we are able to, with the funding that we have, invest it in a way that allows everybody to be included and a part of these conversations. Patrick, what's your thought process?
Right now, I mean, at the heart of all of this is communication. Nate mentioned earlier, we're here from the government, we're here to help. Too many times we're not clear on what that help is, what the desired outcomes can be. And most important part with communication is that active listening skills that true leaders have and they're able to take advantage of. Across our 58 community colleges, we hear repeatedly the challenges in the local community, be it from the truth that is food deserts, folks that simply do not have the base requirements day to day. So how do we track that information, gather that information? As Tracy mentioned earlier, with some of the work with our four-year institutions, sharing that data and then using that data constructively at, say, the state level, right, to be able to meet those needs at the local level. Strong communications, following through. We heard that a few times today, making sure that we have that sustainability in mind. And as we mentioned, just understanding what's happening in our most rural areas. And that's a two-way communication. And a lot of it is listening to what those folks are saying out there.
Hey, Tracy, can I double down on the last comment from Tracy and then from Patrick? I think this is the key to so many things, right? That idea of listening and sort of putting yourself in the person's position that you think you're about to help, because it is all too often the case that we design solutions, we think about what we think is the right service based on our own experience, our own knowledge, and that rarely works out well, because we think we have the answer. We take to a different community, a different situation, only to find that our presumptions were wrong, right? So this whole idea of the active listening, of the designing, don't just try to lift and shift what you've done to somebody else, right? But really try to understand what it is they're grappling with and what it is they'd be well served by. I recall, Tracy, at an event that you had, hearing that, some of the challenges around some of the new federal funding available for people who were seeking low cost broadband and extending the number of people who now had broadband. Some of it was going to people who already had the broadband. So the impact, even though the money went to people who appropriately met the threshold, many of them were already buying and using internet service. So it didn't quite have the impact that might have been intended. So this idea of thinking about designing, redesigning, morphing what we're delivering to really meet the needs of others is just, I can't stress the importance of that. That has been the humbling experience we've had in our NC Share project, is presuming that we knew the answer, only to find that we didn't understand the problem well enough to design the answer until we had much more conversation.
Very good point. Nate, I noticed there's a couple of bullet points here that specifically call out the Digital Equity and Inclusion Collaborative and the celebration of Digital Inclusion Week, the 2nd through the 6th. Any thoughts from your perspective?
Sure. Well, I guess we're 2 days into Digital Inclusion Week now. Our goal, digital inclusion, really refers to the work, right? The effort that everybody's talking about here to build digital equity. And we're spending this week over at the Department of Information Technology really focusing on some of our grantees, some of the entities doing the work. And Patrick mentioned earlier the Digital Navigator initiative, of which the community colleges are a key grantee. But in May, we awarded $4 million to a few anchor institutions that are critical to helping connect North Carolinians to services that address some of these connectivity issues. So that could be skills acquisition, it could be how to find or fix a device, it could be as simple as how to navigate the bureaucratic nightmare of signing up for the Affordable Connectivity Program, right? How do you actually get through that website and get signed up and access those services? Community colleges got more than $1 million to deploy trained digital navigators at 20 of their member institutions serving tier 1 and 2 economically distressed counties. They'll be doing both an English and Spanish version of a digital navigator certificate. And I think importantly, and this ties back to Tracy's and others' points, they're recruiting adults from the communities that are directly affected to be digital navigators, right? So again,
Yeah.
back to that theme of elevating those local voices and trusted voices to make an impact in those communities. We've also got awards to the North Carolina Cooperative Extension to help hire and train digital literacy and skills extension agents for similar purposes to build that local education. State Library is another one of our key grantees, and they are providing digital navigation services at libraries, hiring regional facilitators and coordinators to help participating public and tribal libraries across the state. So, again, that's a theme that I want to just keep hammering, right? Our job here with this unprecedented funding opportunity is not to create new things, not to build new things here at the state level, but really make sure that we are looking for the solutions and the solution makers locally. I think that's one of the things the federal government's doing really well in the BEAD and digital equity programs funded by the bipartisan infrastructure law. They're really, as states approve, submit and get approval for their 5-year plans, they're putting tremendous pressure on us in the administering entity, in this case, the Department of Information Technology, to actively solicit feedback to make our plans and our proposals publicly available, to do the listening, do the hard work on the front end of getting that community engagement. And I think one of our federal partners said at some point, if you submit a 5-year plan and we find out that your county commissioners, your league of municipalities, your local nonprofits haven't weighed in on it, we're going to reject it, right? So we've worked to build a statewide listening tour, to do a new digital equity survey for the first time that helps us hear those local voices as we put together those plans and make sure that we're using really the people's money in a way that most directly benefits the people in these communities.
And that's a very good point. Yes, I have been in those sessions where I've heard federal folks say, if we hear from any local communities that they haven't gotten what we've promised them, then there will be hell to pay. One of the things I do want to throw in that I was remiss, and I think Tommy mentioned it really quickly, and then we'll move on to Q&A, is the funding that was provided to MCNC for the Middle Mile Grant. And for us, that is digital equity, right? And so when I first came to MCNC, Tommy mentioned there is a gaping hole. Yes, there's a hole within our network that could serve and impact these communities in a very significant positive way, particularly if we can get last mile providers to extend off of what you see here is that red line in the proposed route. But if you look at this write-up, it's pretty significant when you think about the fully unserved locations that this could affect. And I believe Matt, Tommy, correct me on the numbers. So can you help me out really quickly on the numbers when we talk about what the Middle Mile Grant is providing versus what MCNC and some of our other partners are also bringing to the table for the total amount for this project?
So in terms of the total project valuation, it's roughly $19 million for the 209 miles of infrastructure enabled. Of that, 11.2 is $2 million is from the Middle Mile Grant from the NTIA, and the balance would be from MCNC's reserves that we are putting toward the project. One of our partners in that, well, two partners that I'll highlight is the Golden Leaf Foundation continues to step up and help us fund areas into areas of the state that meet their definition of rural and of high need. And then again, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but FIDE, made a commitment to us to work with us along the routes to leverage infrastructure that they could facilitate and enable with the electric membership co-ops that are in these 11 counties. And I believe there's 6 or 7 of those that will be able to be leveraged going forward to help build out to those homes. So very excited about it. I did, when you started, reference that we had a big donut hole in the southeast that we needed to figure out how to get into, and we're, MCNC, as long as I've been here, has continued to push where we can to build out middle mile infrastructure. And while I think we've done a good job of doing that, I still think that even after this project is complete, there's still an opportunity to continue to do more.
I agree. And if you notice, there's 696 computer anchor institutions, which include education and healthcare and other nonprofits across the state that will also be impacted by this new build out, which is a very good thing, as well as unserved and underserved. Barry, I am the worst moderator ever because I am not following the time constraints.
Tracy,
So
you're doing a fabulous job. No, you've anticipated, I think, many questions, but we do have a few that have been submitted by the audience. And actually, the first couple, I'm going to pose these together. They come from Danny Allen, and they really do relate to what Tommy was just talking about. This business about access, but also affordability. And Danny says, understandably, rural areas suffer from lower ROI for carriers, but how significant is underservice in urban areas too? And coupled with that, I want to put his other question in here too. This is about the affordability aspect. What is the monthly cost threshold for greater access affordability across the underserved consumers? I would think it's probably the same number for both the urban and the rural, but maybe not. So I thought combining those two together and letting you and Tommy and anybody else on the panel address those will serve it well.
So I will throw this out. I think Nate alluded to this one early on, that it's not just a rural area problem, that it also affects our urban areas. And that is because of the affordable access issue. Nate, do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, first, 2 different questions there on unserved and underserved. If you could go back to slide, I think 6, it's a map of the state that I mentioned in my kind of introductory thoughts. Each of the red dots here, there's so many of them, it doesn't look like dots, but everywhere you see red is a dot. And those locations are locations that don't have, we call them unserved, meaning they don't even have 25 megabits per second download or 3 megabits per second upload speeds. That's the FCC's definition of what constitutes broadband. But you also see some pockets of kind of orangish dots. Those are underserved locations, meaning they've got something, but they don't have service at the speeds that represent our goal of at least 100 megabits per second download, 20 megabits per second upload. That's the bare minimum of anything we're funding through all of these federal programs. And that represents service fast enough with enough latency, reliability to allow, multiple workers to work from home or students to learn from home. Elderly residents to access telemedicine services, right? That's what you need, not to browse your internet, not to check your email, but to interact with the modern economy these days. And so we've got about 150,000 individual locations, homes or businesses that, again, have something, but not the speeds you need to keep up today. And those locations will be eligible for these federal funds for these infrastructure deployment. And I think that's a really important distinction. So I appreciate the audience member who asked that question. On affordability, the average cost of an internet subscription in North Carolina is $60 a month. For about 1.3 million North Carolinians, that represents more than 2% of their monthly income, which is the standard threshold we look at when we figure out whether internet service is affordable or not. And those are the folks we're targeting to make sure that they're aware of the Affordable Connectivity Program, that they know how to navigate it and ensure that they're eligible. And I'll just mention, I should hope that everyone on in this audience, particularly since they're joining via Zoom, has the ability to access an internet connection and can afford it. But where you go to find that out is getinternet.gov, and you can check your eligibility for the Affordable Connectivity Program. You can see if the internet provider that you subscribe to is participating and learn how to actually navigate that process. And so I think that's a really important resource for this audience. Thank you for those questions.
Okay, well, we have a couple more questions, and I'm going to try to couple these together too, because we are getting close to wrapping up here. One is, and I think these kind of build off of what you were just discussing there, Nate. Again, you talk about affordability. There's another aspect of accessibility, I'll say, and that would be the skills. And when we're talking about skills or classes, especially for specific populations like 10th graders, or I've heard the expression, K through gray. Speaking for the gray end, yeah, we need to be educated sometimes too. So there's that, and also the knowledge piece of it, but also the technology piece of it. Strategies for low cost, no cost devices. This seems to be a lagging variable to North Carolina's overall solutions in digital equity. So I'll throw those together, and Tracy, if you want to direct it to some appropriate panelist.
I'm going to throw it out to any one of them who feels comfortable answering that one.
Don't all step up at once.
Yes.
Yeah, I think one of the experiences that we saw, during the pandemic was the pivot. I know that I had 2 high school children at home, and seeing that pivot from, instructor-led teaching in the classroom to leveraging connection out of the house, here in Raleigh, that's one thing to say. But with the low and no cost devices, at least in North Carolina and Wake County, did a very good job getting those devices out to the K through 12 and enabling kids to work or to do their schoolwork out of the house. Extending that out across the state was a different story. And again, it comes down to partnerships and communication and sustainability. One of our slides earlier said, what does this finish line look like? I don't think there is a finish line. I think we're in a continual improvement process here where we establish the baseline that we have. We've got an established baseline. How do we continue to grow and improve that baseline? This isn't something that's a one and done, or the funding's going to fix this for us. It's building that community, keeping those partnerships in place, continuing that advocacy, and making sure that we continue to grow and improve here.
Yeah, I'll chime in too. I think, on the skills side, especially since you mentioned specific age demographics, I think it's really important for us to remember that the folks who need this service, need access the most, are often the most vulnerable, right? Particularly when it comes to either our very elderly residents or children, right? Teenagers learning these skills. I think it's really important for the state and its partners, and for anyone else doing this kind of training, to elevate a message around cybersecurity and privacy as we develop skills, right? It is not enough to say, hey, here's the internet, go have fun. We've got to make sure that folks know the very real risk out there, right? And how to navigate that risk. So I think that's that is incumbent upon the state in particular as it disperses these funds to make sure that that's woven into any kind of training regimen. On the device side, I mentioned earlier that we'll be rolling out in the next 2 months our Digital Champions grant funding program. Stay tuned. I'd say go to ncbroadband.gov to watch out for announcements about that funding. But that is a grant funding program that will be open to nonprofit entities across the state as well as local governments. I think device availability will be one of the really important criteria for eligible applications. So our hope, with American Rescue Plan funds, the state got $50 million to allocate to digital literacy and awareness. I think device availability is a critical component of that $50 million plan. And I think about $14 million is becoming available in that next round of funding. So stay tuned for more announcements from us.
Okay, thanks for that, Nate. Tracy, I think we've just about reached the end of our time together today. I would like to say on behalf of all of our audience to thank our panelists, and thank you, Tracy, for conducting this very stimulating, provocative session. Have just a couple of announcements to make on behalf of the Marconi Society. Let's see, we had a slide. Did we? Yamini, can we get the slides back up on the screen? Okay, here we go. I wanted to make sure everybody was aware of our next program in this series, Connecting Maine. This is the all-in approach for funding sources, community engagement, and sustainability in another state that's pursuing these initiatives. That'll be coming up on Tuesday, November 7th at 12 p.m. Eastern. This will be another online webinar. And finally, if I could have the next slide. So this is just one of the programs offered by the Marconi Society. If you'd like to take advantage of everything the Society has to offer, we welcome you to become a Society member. You'll be then have access to networking opportunities, magazine features, monthly newsletters, as well as events online and in person, such as this. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us. And please visit the Marconi Society website, join as a member, sign up for our mailing list so you can find out more about our upcoming programs. Thank you.
Thank you.